Missed one. There we go. Hello, I'm Mark Farrington. I'm Broadcast Systems Manager at Bauer in London. Golden Square met almost all of those criteria. It was definitely small and rat infested, but it was very pretty. A brief summary of who Bauer are and the project. There's some of our brands. We, as a company, had two buildings in London this time last year. The Camden office was the home of our publishing division, and the building Golden Square in Soho that David mentioned, which had been the home of Virgin Radio since 1994, there we go. It's a long-term aspiration of the company to bring together the audio and publishing into one building, which we've finally able to realise. There was a press release with various of the words that are up there, including the moving by late summer 2023. More on that later. I can't do this talk without talking about Bruce Davidson. There he is in one of the studios. Bruce was technology director when I set out on the project. Bruce was kind of a key advocate for us sort of really getting the funding and the headroom to do what we wanted to do to really achieve the best results for the business. Bruce's kind of fingerprints are all over what we achieved, so yeah, he's absolutely, and also an awful lot of the wrangling with contractors, etc. Bruce very much took on himself, so yeah, it was a key part of the project. I thought the best way to sort of summarise the scale was with big numbers. Brace, brace. We're a technical conference, we should be able to get through this. We have 17 broadcast studios. They are connected to everything else by 192 network fibres. I'm not going to read all of these numbers out. 2,137 channels of multicast audio, though, as of, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. It goes up and down with time. 600 terabytes of storage in our virtualization infrastructure that handles our playout, logging, various other things. 800 meters of LED tape, which sounds like a lot. It really is, but you see a picture of the studio, it all makes sense. We have 46 kilometers of office data cabling, which is a stat one of our IP team dug out for me. That's enough to reach from the office to a sort of dog food factory just outside Guildford, which I quite like. And we keep it all on with 150 kilovolt kVA generator for when it all goes wrong, and we've got 4 hours of UPS autonomy to back it all up. I think that's all the big ones. There are various others there. Make sure I've read the one that's in the quiz out. So what did we learn for the project? I'm not going to do a kind of a therapy session too much. I won't sort of go blow by blow through it all, but I'm going to focus on some of the key learnings for me from the project. Some of them things we did right, some of them things we did wrong. Spot the difference. So yeah, that's my plan. I've got pretty pictures in sort of commercial breaks throughout as well. So, big one, know what you want to achieve from the start. So we're really fortunate. The project board for the overall project had some quite clear objectives for us. Those things that were in that press release, the future fit and flexible spaces. And then sort of Bruce and I and a few others sat down and kind of turned that into what we wanted to achieve from the project ourselves. So very early on we said fully audio over IP throughout the studios. 2 reasons for that. One, future-proofing. The other being it's a multi-tenanted building. Our CTA, Central Technical Area, is down on the ground floor, and we are 2 floors up with the studios. So yeah, we didn't want to have to run further multi-core cables, etc., through other tenants' space for any later changes. So everything's fibre, backbone throughout, all down to the CTA. The other thing was flexibility. That sort of was really a big thing that came from the project board. We weren't to have an absolute radio studio, a greatest hits radio studio, a magic radio studio. Every space anyone should be able to walk into, regardless of whether they were an audio brand or one of our publishing colleagues. We do a lot of podcasts for Empire Magazine and things like that, and press a button, turn it into their own space. The final one is audio first, video a very close second. Something that we really weren't able to do in Golden Square was effectively visualize the studios. A couple of them kind of worked okay, but there was a lot of compromises to make that work. So we sort of set out to make sure that when we captured that design, we made sure we were thinking about video from the start. Try again, there we go. This is a big learning the other way. Not everyone gets what a radio station needs. Big project like this, we had our little corner with the studios in, but there was necessarily, say little corner, quite a big corner, we'll come to that, necessarily quite a lot of interface with the rest of the project. And it's fair to say that lots of these people I didn't know existed before the project started. Quantity surveyors, project management, M&E contractors, the main build contractor and the landlord don't necessarily understand your spec and why it's important to you throughout the whole project. sort of on a roughly least weekly basis, someone that was involved in interfacing with these guys was kind of making sure that they hadn't forgotten why that was important, that Cat 5 point was there, or why it did actually matter, the spec of that cabling or whatever that ran through their demise. So yeah, that was a big learning. And again, we'll come back to, but various times through the project, it was really important to really keep on top of that spec and make sure it was still there throughout the various stages that the project sort of necessarily flows through. Here's a good one. Sometimes you have to do mad things to win everyone over. So, as I mentioned, our team sat below the kind of main project board. And one thing that they were really keen on when they first saw the building, you've seen the sort of estate agent's photo back at the beginning, there's a lot of glass. And having sort of walked through the big atrium in the centre of the building, the project board were really keen that you could see right into everything from the atrium. Which we weren't anti, but we also wanted studios with reasonable acoustics. And so we submitted our original plans, and they said, but it was going to be fully glazed. And we said, yes, but where will I put your logos? And how will I make it sound nice? The photo here is a piece of glass with some tape on it. That was a 2.5-hour round trip for me to put said tape on the glass to show kind of how big we were actually talking about for the glazing. So the glass is 2.2 meters by 1.4 meters. It's a serious piece of glass into each of those spaces, and there's 2 per studio. We did win them around, and they did eventually understand that it did kind of matter that we couldn't have a big glass wall all the way along the front, which is good, because otherwise it would have been very hard to put logos in places that worked for visualization and make it sound nice. So first few photos, this is the sort of obligatory picture of the roof. We haven't been up there really since. This was an aerial survey. But that's kind of where we are in London. You can see the Shard, and I think you can just, BT Tower is probably just behind that building there. So yeah, that's where we are. We're just next to Euston Station, essentially. This is very, very early on when it first got scary. This was sent to us by Transmation, our contractor, with, we've completed the rip out. Oh yeah, there's a big space, isn't it? So yeah, fortunately it didn't take very long before it looked like this, and plasterboard boxes appeared, obviously full of chop saws, as they always are. And we'll come back to more pictures in a bit. So evolution is better than revolution. Another one of those things that we sort of set out very early on was we knew that we were going to be at various points of this project on a bit of a tight timetable. We didn't have a huge amount of time to get this done and delivered. We weren't really in a position to be re-upskilling on a whole new technology stack. So we worked with suppliers that we were already familiar with. We'd already set out as using Livewire from Axia as the main sort of core audio over IP technology. We didn't change the playout system in the middle of the build because that would have been an atrocious idea. And we kept sort of internal software, our transmission switcher and router that are familiar to our users. 2 real benefits of that. One, it made the build a lot easier for our technology team because I wasn't getting people to learn how to use a thing when they configured it. Well, it was a little bit, but not that much. I was handing them bits of technology that we were already familiar with, and also massively made the training easier with the users. Obviously, user training is always the bit you end up rushing because certainly in commercial radio, the moment the studio's ready, they want to go on air with it. And so it really made it a lot easier to do that training because it's much more a conversion course. We could concentrate on, you know, the exciting, fun, pretty bits of the studio, not so much the kind of, oh, don't press that button, that does something different on this desk type stuff. But don't be afraid to do things differently. So coming back to that visualization aim, this is the very early stages of one of our A studios. That's a bit of sort of internal, visualized studios is probably a better way of putting it. We've got 5 of these. Going back to that big thing about cameras and angles, which we could never really achieve in the old building because we didn't have big enough rooms and we didn't have the furniture layout that worked. I and some of the programming guys spent quite a lot of time early on researching different studios around the world, different layouts that worked. We came up with this kind of hybrid of a sort of breakfast bar, commercial radio sort of layout and a talk studio. I call it the sort of big kitchen table. Where there's nobody on one side and everybody is still sort of facing. Which preserves the eye lines for conversation and gives us a fairly clean shot onto every position as required. Not quite finished there, but the cameras are up, so that's good. Really big one. Sometimes you can get more by spending less. Again, doing that sort of capturing needs bit early on in the project, spent a bit of time with some of the producers who are always the power users of the studios. The presenters just turn up. Honest. And one of the guys said, I'd really want to do more from my position. I don't want to have to get up and go around and play about with the mixer over the presenter's shoulder. what can we do about that? And we've been buying proprietary to the Axia system headphone selector panels for a long time, which are a relatively expensive component, but give the ability to adjust volume and select source. And it occurred to me that we can make panels within Pathfinder, the Axia logic engine, to control things, and we can buy Windows tablets, which is what that is. It also occurred to me that I had other people to do these things. So I had a chat with a member of the technology team, Tom, and said, can I give you a challenge? How do you fancy making this work? And he looked at me kind of with trepidation, and then after a few weeks came back with this, which essentially replicates what that does with the additional functionality that Dave had asked us for. So we can change the record source on the PC from it. It gives control over local mic muting and that kind of thing. And crucially, a Windows tablet cost us £800, and the volume control, and was doing 2 positions. The volume controls were just north of 1,000. So we saved quite a lot of money and provided a lot more functionality in the hands of the presenters. So we're really pleased with that one. All right, more pretty pictures. This is always my favourite bit when it really starts to look like a radio station. We've got screens going in that one, and we've got furniture appearing there. Obviously, not quite finished, a bit missing fabric in those, but it wasn't too long before we were able to unleash the team on it. It was an entirely internal project. We had 2 or 3 sort of freelancers doing various roles, but fundamentally, Bauer technology team driving this, the London team, kind of the engine of it, but colleagues from all over the country, about 30 people in total, sort of done their bit in the project. We were kind of fortunate to have sort of that sort of technology resource to draw on to deliver the project, and almost all of us use drills apparently, just even me. There's some more studios having things done to them before we got into them, I think, and eventually we got a CTA as well. There's Gary doing some things, and David. So the CTA, I'll come to this in a little bit, but one thing we were really fortunate to be able to do with it was the CTA came to us very late in the project. We already had a lot of the studio work done by then. We were quite fortunate to be able to unbox IP address, put away everything, and do a sort of base config on it, so that we were able to go from an empty CTA with power and I'm not even sure there was aircon when we first got it, but an empty CTA with power to full rack, so we could do sort of really start to test studios and everything in about 2 weeks end to end, mostly thanks to the people you see in those pictures. It wasn't all Gary and David, but it was certainly, they were a large part of it. And yeah, UPSs have a lot of batteries. There is a lot of batteries. Which brings me to the reason the CTA was late, which is that generators are hard. Kind of comes back a bit to that thing about like really keeping over all of the spec throughout. There'd always been a requirement for a generator. There had always been a generator in the plans as drawn. What was noticed about stage 3, which is the way that projects seem to work when they get to a certain size, was that the earlier M&E consultant hadn't kind of realized that generators need air, which being engines, they very much do, and had managed to put it in a sort of entirely airless box. The calculation for exactly how much ducting was needed to provision the inlet and outlet air for said generator to use the Imperial unit was 62 Bruce Willises, which in practice would have meant if we'd left everything the way it was, getting into the CTA, you'd have had to been about yay high, I think, because we didn't have a lot of ceiling clearance to get those ducts in. So we had to stop everything, redraw all the plans and start again, which meant that we didn't start building work in the CTA area till about 3-4 months late, leading to about a 6-month delay on the final project completion. It's not the only delay, but it's a large part of it. It's not the sole reason we didn't move in summer 2023. That was also heavily optimistic. But that was the biggest single problem. It is all there now and it all works, and fortunately there is now enough ducting, but it did involve a big hole in some concrete and a complete redraft of the basement. So yeah, generators are hard. So it's PTP. I think there's various veterans are struggling with PTP in the audience. We're fully AES67. Everything is IP. There is no sort of, it's not no backup, but the backup all lives within the IP space. So we really needed to work. And scaling that up from the size of what we were doing in Golden Square to the Lantern proved to be a lot trickier than we thought. Turns out that some devices really struggle when there's more than about 40 clients on the network. Other devices need a boundary clock. Other devices hate boundary clocks. Other devices are Dante, so all bets are off. So yeah, PTP is difficult. We've got there. It's been through lots of people much cleverer than me to come up with our final solution, which works and is resilient and. Yeah, that was the other real serious thing that at one point I was like, we might not actually get this going in time. We did. It's fine. A big time management one, don't forget the old place. I say fully internal project working within our own team, and a sort of constant thing where you sort of forget that somebody has to be there looking after it, and they might sometimes need help if something goes very wrong. Often finding a bit of a resource challenge there. So it's just a useful kind of learning that as long as it stays on air, you do still need to remember it and look after it. Hey, it's got a nice door, as David alluded to. Everything takes longer than you think, not because of Gary, he just happens to be in this picture. General time management, however much contingency you build in, something like that generator will happen and will cause everything to take longer than you think. So just double the contingency again and then double it again for good luck. And then you'll probably be okay. Maybe. Probably not. Who knows? That very much, just everything takes longer than you think. So, does it all work? More pretty pictures, interesting pretty pictures. Look, shiny now. So yes, it does. We got it all in, and commissioning is what's going on in that picture there. There is a rack full of things. As I say, all fully audio over IP. That is one of our transmission chains. We've got an A and a B rack for all of it for resilience. So top to bottom, adds insertion, audio processing, silence detection. And I think there's a delay unit down the bottom there as well. And then from there we hand off to Arkiva, but there's no sort of hidden XLRs in the back of that rack. That's all audio over IP end to end, hence why the P2P has to work. And so here's one of the studios. I had to look really carefully at this picture to work out which studio it is. It's 2.2 for studio fans. The reason for that being that objective about every studio can be everyone's. So if you walk into that studio and you twiddle about with the desk and select your scene, you come in as an absolute presenter and select your scene. An API call goes out to the branding system, and that will change the absolute radio. The IP DMX will change the LED lights. The desk will do what it does and load your profile. The mic processing settings will change. The screens at the top will all change to give you the appropriate monitoring information. The only thing I couldn't do, any ideas, please submit, is change the logo on the mic muff. So they do still have to do that manually, unfortunately. But yeah, so that is very much that objective of everything being sort of one touch and as simple as possible to make the spaces flexible. Similarly, sort of further control, things like changing the TV channel on the TV up there, or changing, there's sort of sub-versions of branding within the various brands. There's all one-touch buttons on the desk. There's no sort of digging deep into kind of third-party systems or anything else. It's all sort of API-based. There's one of the smaller studios, very much a similar vibe, although a slightly smaller setup, a bit more conventional layout. That one's in greatest hits radio mode. You can tell because there's lots of paper. The whole radio station runs on paper. But yeah, you see different monitoring up at the top there. That's showing the cameras from, I think, from the other site in Manchester. It's also got the ad splits for that network because it's a much bigger regional network than our London brands. Yeah, there's another studio. And the good news is that everyone seems to be pretty happy. I mean, if you've heard otherwise, don't tell me. Obligatory happy people moving in. We got all of the stations moved in pretty seamlessly. There's inevitably the odd bump. The biggest way you'd have told that people had moved is they didn't stop talking about it for about 2 weeks. Lots of this sort of thing. Dan's a particular advocate of pictures of shiny studios on Twitter anyway. There's a picture there of our performance space, which I haven't excessively dwelled on, but we've got a live area that Ronan's demonstrating in that picture. This being a Bauer presentation, I have to put a Ken Bruce picture in it. It's actually in my contract. But the management also very happy. There's Paul looking happy. First off, no, that's not true. Paul's a very happy man. And yeah, everyone very happy. We've been live since April, Easter, pretty much just after Easter, with all the brands. We left Absolute till the end because their split music makes everything complicated. But yeah, we're now all fully in and haven't had to move back again, which is always my biggest dread with these things. They you are going to have to roll it back for a bit. Haven't had to do that. I mean, can't anymore. The building's very much ripped out and inhabited by one grumpy security guard. But yeah, that's the story of the Lantern, and I'm under time. That's the first. So yeah, done.
Well-deserved applause.
Oh, thank you.
Well-deserved. Now, we're going to have some questions, I know, for Mark on this project, because you don't get many chances in life to do something like this, and you may be involved in something similar. So, questions for Mark on anything to do with that, please. Was that Gary praying, by the way, on that shot where he's...
Probably.
Yeah,
it was it.
Great stuff. Now, first question, please. So we are over there for the catch box, please.
Going to be
Eye contact, underarm. Let's all have a laugh. Right. Yay!
Better than I'd have thrown it.
It'll get there soon.
Who wants that?
Here, it's coming. It's being brought across manually. Here we are. Go for it. Great stuff.
What would you do differently if you could start all over again?
Question. More time. I think, yeah, definitely more time. I think I'd probably have very early on taken less of it on myself. Certainly in the early stages, doing the time planning and all of the ordering of equipment and kind of trying to sort of, I did not single-handedly do any of the equipment configuration, but trying to kind of be over the top of kind of how all of the things would interface and all of that was challenging. I've definitely become a better delegator due to doing this project. It's a shame because I'm a broadcast engineer. The fun bit is actually configuring the new shiny toys. It is not doing the spreadsheets with the dates in, and neither is it doing purchase orders. But sadly, I probably should have delegated more of the fun and kept more of the boring stuff. But yeah, I think that's probably the big one.
Next question. Here it is down here. Thank you. Don't be shy, by the way. I know you've got questions in your head. Thank you. Well done.
I was wondering about your visualization system. I saw the monitoring there. Is it all the same system in each studio, and which one is it?
Yes, it's Virtual Director, running vMix behind the scenes. Every studio, budget cuts. Most studios have it. Others are ready for it, essentially, if the desire to do more visualization is needed. It's NDI behind the scenes because of that IP thing. So rather than SDI cables running through the building, which we can't really do. Yeah, we're pretty happy with it. So every bit of sort of social content from the breakfast shows, etc., that goes up online comes out of Virtual Director. They do bring in external cameras for like really big guests because video people like more control than we can give them with the fixed mounted cameras. But yeah, really happy with it.
You know, when you said you went to see other studios, sort of just to get some inspiration, what did you learn from that?
It was a bit late era pandemic when we were doing that. So when I say went to see, I mean Googled. So, yeah, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, it would not take you very long to find a studio in Australia that looks very like ours do. Yeah, I mean, essentially that. It's looking at kind of what other places are doing differently, and you can find quite a lot of person, guest type layout studios, whereas looking at sort of more innovative spaces, there are some that have gone for a very TV style studio, like a long, thin desk, which would be horrible for that conversation flow. And then, again, we sort of found something remarkably like that, not quite the same, but remarkably like we went for in the end, and would like, actually that would probably work, and so that basically, we looked around and saw what we found out.
And to what extent did you take, he says, speaking as a disc jockey, users on board in, you know, I like, every presenter walked into a studio, you sit down and you know whether you want to be on air, you know whether it feels right. How did you take that on board?
I think that doing it as an internal project, ourselves, really helps because I have worked in the team that supports it day to day. I've done it for a while, but I have. And so I do know the people who give you constructive feedback and the people that will complain about whatever you do. And again, Bruce really helped with this as well. Through the engineering, the data engineering team these days, we also kind of had those conversations with people. We also reached out through the programming management. So we didn't say, program controller, what do you think? We said, can you find me your two kind of most engaged users? So that conversation I talked about with the tablet, with a guy called Dave, who's Absolute Radio's producer, that came through Paul sending me a list of, here are the things Dave wishes he could do at the current studio, and me going, we could do that now. Why have we never spoken? So Dave and I had a long chat, and we made sure it could do all of the stuff in the new studio. So yeah, that basically, we found out the right people and talked to them.
And just one final point, unless there are no other, question down here? No? You do? Let's have this one here. There we are.
I'm just curious about the acoustics of the whole building because it was a new build. So obviously there's a really significant amount of acoustic treatment to all the studio spaces, but what were you able, was that part of your job to really consider the acoustics of the working spaces? And
so not part of my job at all. There was some consideration to acoustics, particularly of meeting rooms. Weirdly, it isn't strictly a new build, but that's yeah, we arrived at it at base build, technically. but there was some consideration. There were acoustic consultants used in that. It still has a lot of glass, and it is still quite echoey in places. If you are very sensitive to such things, you have to choose your place to sit. But yeah, that wasn't part of my job, fortunately. But yes, it was considered a little bit.
Mark, thank you very much for sharing that with us.